Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, our weekly show about how technology is changing the creative industries. Today on the program, Digital Product Passport Explained. A big part of the new EU legislations that are coming to the fashion industry is focused around traceability throughout the supply chains. And a huge part of that is the upcoming requirement that every product sold in the EU will need to carry a Digital Product Passport, DPP for short, with information about raw materials, production, distribution, point of sales, as well as recycling and other end-of-life scenarios. But what exactly is a digital product passport? How does it work in practice? And what will it mean for fashion brands? My view is that DPP is the single most important carrier that kind of binds all the EU requirements together into one package or product, whether it's traceability, carbon footprint calculations, and end-of-life responsibility, and more. Obviously, this is a huge topic, and there are several projects out there trying to address this issue. And in this episode, where I speak to representatives from 3 companies that are trying to lead the way. We have Jenny Wärn, Head of Implementation, Trustrace, Sandra Roos, Vice President Sustainability, Kappahl, and Staffan Olsson, Head of Public Affairs, GS1 Sweden. These people have recently announced a pilot project for Digital Product Passport called Trace for Value. And it addresses how DPP will work in the fashion industry. Now, we both had Sandra Roos, who is a famous sustainability researcher, gone sustainability director, as well as GS1 in our latest transformation conference. And this is a sort of continuation of what we talked about then, as well as an opportunity to go deeper on the subject. My name is, as always, Konrad Olsson, Editor-in-Chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind. And before we go on, I just want to mention a couple of things we have coming up in the Scandinavian Mind universe. Of course, Beauty Innovation, our insights newsletter on the beauty industry. We are sending out the save the dates for our upcoming second Beauty Innovation talks. The first one was in Copenhagen earlier this year. The first one in Stockholm, though, it's on October 25, talking about beauty tech. That's Beauty Innovation Talks on October 25. This can take place at our headquarters here on Grev Turegatan in Stockholm. So sign up at scandinavianmind.com/beautyinnovation to get access to that invite. Also, my weekly editor's letter, Observations, goes out every Tuesday. You can sign up by clicking on my column at scandinavianmind.com. Just scroll down a bit to see my face there. Also, just our regular newsletter, contains everything about this, upcoming events, all the content coming out from Scandinavian Mind. It's scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. Don't miss out on that. So, all right, enough plugging away about our newsletters. Here now, my conversation with Jenny Wärn, Sandra Roos, and Staffan Olsson. Enjoy. All right, I'm sitting here with a trio of dignitaries and 3 people working with a project called Trace for Value, and will help me and the listeners understand what a digital product passport can be and how it will affect the fashion industry. I welcome now Jenny Wärn, Head of Implementation, Trustrace. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
We also have Sandra Roos, Vice President Sustainability, Kappahl. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you.
And Staffan Olsson, Head of Public Affairs at GS1 Sweden.
Hello, thank you.
So I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves a little bit, and I'm going to start with Jenny, because maybe you can also give a bit of a background to why you 3 are in this room together, because I invited you because you are running this project Trace for Value. It's kind of a pilot project of what a digital product passport can be, and I was so fascinated by the presentation you guys had a few weeks ago that I wanted to invite you all to the podcast. But so Jenny, describe your role in this and maybe a few words on the Trace for Value project.
Absolutely. So Trace for Value is a project that is managed by RISE and sponsored by Vinnova. And basically it's prolonging of an initiative within European Commission that is a prolonging of the initiative, the Green Deal, to start to see how can the textile industry move towards become more sustainable. And in that journey, also, how do we improve the circularity in that? So the Trace for Value is a program, and DPP in Textiles is a part of that program that I'm in lead of, together with several actors and stakeholders in this area, among Sandra and Staffan. So what we'll do here is that we will run a pilot and see, based on what we know of this coming initiative as per today, how should that be able to be implemented in a real case scenario.
And I think people might know what Trustrace is. You have been featured in our platform quite a few times, but just give the headlines of Trustrace and your role in this.
Yeah. So Trustrace, we are an IT SaaS platform for traceability. We focus on the compliance data management within the textile value chains. And we provide solutions that capture and digitalize the supply chain and material traceability data. And this data should be able then to be shared between brand suppliers and, as a specific focus within DPP, also the end consumers.
Wonderful. We'll get back to you, Jenny. Sandra, I'm going to bring you into the discussion. So Friends of Scandinavian Mind, who visited the Transformation Conference a few weeks ago, saw you on stage. We talked about some of these issues. So describe your role briefly and why Kappahl has engaged in this project.
So my role as Vice President Sustainability is to lead the strategic sustainability work at Kappahl. And part of this is, of course, creating transparency in the supply chain, enabling circular business models, and of course applying or complying with all legislation coming, such as the Digital Product Passport. And for us, this Trace for Value process or project has been an opportunity to have a learning in the organization about what is a digital product passport, what does it mean, do we have the data, where do we have the data. So it's been really hands-on deep dive into creating a digital product passport, so learning by doing.
All right, I'm so curious to hear about these learnings. But let's try to explain the basics here. I've been hearing about this digital product passport for maybe a year and a half or so. It's kind of been murmuring in the fashion industry. There's something that's coming. What is it? And then I visited a conference called Tech Arena this spring, where I saw Staffan on stage talking about DPP. Which was kind of the first time I really got a grip of this whole thing. It's a huge undertaking when it's being implemented, and of course it's because of this new legislation coming from the EU. But Staffan, just describe GS1's interest in this and your role, and I'd like you to maybe also then explain what a DPP is. Let's get into it.
Sure. So I'm Staffan, I'm with GS1 Sweden. We've been working on DPP for some time now, trying to get a grasp of what it is, we as well. It comes, the name, we've been seeing it since a number of years, came mainly out of the EU and their legislative process, where they wanted to create a digital representation of products. But maybe I should start with just giving a short background on GS1, who we are.
Sure.
So GS1 Sweden is part of a global organization called GS1. We used to call ourselves EAN, so EAN Barcodes is our well-known brand, but the organization is called GS1 since many years now. So we're a global organization. We're represented in 116 countries. We have 2 million customers around the world, and people claim that our barcodes are scanned 10 billion times a day. and we're not for profit. So we try to help customers get the most benefit out of using our standards. That's pretty much what we do. And when we saw this DPP thing coming, we thought maybe we can help here, because what is being described as the DPP infrastructure, or from the more technical sides that the EU is presenting to the world, is pretty much what we've been doing for almost 50 years. So it all builds on a unique identifier on products that should be machine readable and be able to link to a digital representation of that product. And we've been doing all of those things for many years. So for us, this is a new challenge to take on to make sure that our stuff really works, and also working together with a lot of other stakeholders, because we're not the only ones that can provide help here. There are other standards bodies and other technologies that may come into play as well.
Well, Staffan, maybe you can describe, because in your presentation you had a slide which I still have on my mind, where it's a big circle where you describe from the sourcing of raw materials into the production of a product, on its way to the distribution from the brands out to the retailers. Then the retailers are selling this product, it gets into the consumer's hands, and after the consumers have used the products, it needs to be recycled or reused or taken care of in many ways. So we're talking about the entire lifespan of a product that's going to be somehow documented in this DPP.
Yes.
Am I right?
You're right, but it will depend on the product category. So if the product is a detergent, there is no need to keep track of you just use it up and then you're done. But for a garment or a chainsaw or a laptop computer, something like that, you want to probably track more, and in some cases track also events that happen to that product during the use phase of its life. So if you repair it or you change a few things on it, maybe that is data that is relevant from a sustainable point of view. And also a recycler may want to know if you changed and added new materials into the product after it was manufactured. So not only the data from the manufacturer is needed, but also data that may have been added later. If you change the battery in a laptop, or if you change metal in the buttons on a shirt or something like that. But there will be product category specific rules coming out of the EU as time goes by.
Right, and the timeline that we have is 2030, right? That's where the proposal is that every product sold in the EU will need or require a product passport.
I think for some categories a bit earlier than that. So the kind of the horizontal, as they call it, the general baseline legislation, which is a framework, which would most likely be decided on Q1 2024, maybe Q2. But that doesn't tell you anything about the data points and which categories are affected. So that will come later. It's being forecasted that textile it will go out very early in this. So there will be so-called delegated acts describing the detailed rules for that, also maybe coming out in 2024, 2025, and then there may be a grace period of perhaps 18 months or so before it comes into force. So 2026, 2027 probably for textile, but that's just guessing from my side.
Right. No, a lot of guesswork and a lot of it's a maze trying to understand all the ins and outs of the EU. I've been trying to do it now for 6 months. Jenny, I want to bring, because what we're talking about here is basically some kind of digital carrier of information. So and it relates to this idea of making fashion more sustainable, but the passport is just like a tool. So it depends on what we fill it with and how we use that data. Can you talk from your perspective? What do you think we need to fill this passport with in order to make, and how does this kind of enable the fashion industry to be more sustainable?
I think just raising the need for a DPP or a digital product passport is putting the finger on the importance of sustainability, or it putting the finger on importance of transparency. And with that traceability, because there is no transparency, or there is no sustainability without being transparent at the same time. So this is setting the scene of what's important for the fashion brands to focus in going forward. And that this should be available for the end consumer and the authorities. So how do we do that? How do we actually, because as you say, this visualization of a product in someone's mobile phone, when you scan the QR code that's attached to the garment, if that's not providing you with any relevant data, it doesn't add any value. So what I would like to say is that the solution for how to get that data into that QR code, or not into the QR code, but into the visualization, that's sort of the key. And our experience is saying that it takes long time for an organization within the fashion industry to actually start to accomplish and collect this data and make it available. So I think that is one of the key. And Sandra, you can fill on what you do for Kappahl, but this is the reason for why to get started as soon as possible, because despite, as Staffan says, there is a lot of unclarities still how this should be managed, but we know a lot also. So for sure we can start. It's no need to wait. And we also have an idea of the technical framework that EU is suggesting. So it's not only for the brands to find what data should they go after, but also how should they store it? How should they distribute this data? So we don't know everything, but we know more than enough to get started.
Right. So Sandra, from a fashion brand's perspective, so traceability has been kind of a buzzword in fashion for many years. And when I started learning about DPP, or Digital Product Passport, it was the first time I kind of felt like, okay, maybe this is the tool that actually will help realize this across the entire industry. Maybe we need this kind of standardized way of tracing data. But let's talk a little bit about what kind of data you want as a fashion brand or a need, and what type of data are you actually collecting in this project?
I mean, traceability is one part of it, and with traceability we usually mean that we know who is producing our garments, who has done the weaving, the dyeing of the fabric, who has done the yarn, and where does the fiber come from. So traceability is sort of the key to who are we going to ask the sustainability questions. And then when we know who we are working with, who we are not working with, then we can start to ask questions about human rights handling. We can start to ask questions about chemicals. We can ask questions about energy use and energy sources. So, I mean, just like Jenny says, we don't know the exact data points that there will be. But since we know what is important for sustainability today, we know that, well, probably there will be something about climate, probably there will be something about chemicals, probably there will be something about human rights and wage levels. So I think to not overcomplicate things, if we start with what we know is important to report on and try to collect that data from every actor in the supply chain, I think we've come very far.
Right, and talk about what you have been collecting or the plan is within this project. What from Kappahl's point of view, so to speak.
So in this project, we work with two products. It's the Göran trousers and the Olle sweater. So it's really two products. And they are produced at different factories in different countries with different supply chains, which makes it, I mean, you start with two suppliers and then you get a lot of actors involved. But what we do is we search the whole supply chain for data and then fill in the data fields in the matrix. And so for this pilot in Trace for Value, we sort of follow this data protocol. And then we also work with Trustrace, like in a bigger perspective. We are onboarding all our suppliers now in week 46 to the tool. So this is not something that we don't work with traceability just for the Trace for Value project, but traceability via Trustrace is really something that we do for all our products and all our supply chains, which we are very proud of. And there are so many tools. One of the first questions we ask is, do you use the HIG tools? This global set of tools, the facility module for environment, the facility module for social impact, that Sustainable Apparel Coalition has developed. If they already report in standardized tools such as HIG or something else, then and send these modules to us and share them with us, then we already have a lot of data that we need. And if they don't, then we have this set of questions that we ask all our suppliers.
Right. Talk about the process of it's like finding suppliers that can provide this data, maybe asking suppliers to sort of provide this data and comply with all these things. What's that been like? And I mean, I'm sure it has to affect how you choose your suppliers and will affect in the future. I mean, that's got to be, when I talk to fashion brands, I mean, Kappahl has at least a certain scale to do this, and they've been wise enough to hire you in your role. But for smaller brands, I sense a lot of frustration and worry actually about this. How are we supposed to put the right demands of our suppliers? Sometimes the brands don't even know. Maybe they know the factory they're working with, but beyond that, they don't know where all the threads and sort of raw materials are coming from. But so from your perspective, working with this, how do you foresee this relationship between brands and the factory suppliers?
I mean, this is difficult because you really have to find business partners that share the same vision of the future as you do. Because if you put requirements on a factory and the top management, they don't believe in traceability, or they don't believe in the climate impact or something, then they will just do a show for you and maybe not change or maybe not chase their supply chain as agreed. And then you come back 1 year later and nothing has happened. So I think this partnership many people are talking about also, but to actually partner up with suppliers that share the same vision. And that's maybe easy said than for Kappahl with a certain purchase power. We are not as big as other brands, and sometimes we trot after the bigger brands and are happy to get into a large factory where someone else has already done the sustainability work. And sometimes we are big enough to transition a factory and give them so much orders so that there will be an economic incentive for them. But that's really a point, and we can see that many factory owners out there, they understand the whole thing. They understand about the climate change. It's here. They see the floodings. They see the fires. But then there are still companies that maybe do not really care, because they work a lot with maybe the domestic market in the production country where no such requirements are put. And so we will have to, we will continue working with those that can support us in our vision.
Jenny, I feel like this is kind of your wheelhouse in how you collect data from suppliers. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with kind of, for one, having factories and suppliers out there in different countries provide the data, and do you think the notion of a DPP, will that help or just complicate things?
Yes, I mean, DPP will put the focus on this is important, but to continue on what Sandra says, I think for this to work, not from only a DPP point of view, but from a sustainability point of view, there needs to be a build of trust between all the actors in the supply chain. And as per today, we can see those brands with having sustainability as part of their business model, they are the most effective ones, that when it's actually coming to also be able to gather this traceability data, because there is a trust between that brand and the supply chain. And I'm in contact with manufacturers in Asia, as Sandra says, and they are aware of this for sure. But there also needs to be a trust and a business and economical incentive in actually acting in the right way, because the climate change is more and more obvious for every year. No one can say I didn't understood or I didn't know, I didn't see this coming. And I think that is one of the key driver for me personally, for Trustrace and for the DPP initiative, is that no one should be able to say I didn't know. We will know. And if there is a will, this is absolutely possible to gather all this data that we need to make this improve. And when we have the data, you can't say I didn't know, but you can actually act upon that data. And Kappahl is one of the front runners, and I'm super proud to be able to cooperate with you in this area. And there will be followers, and there will be slow starters, and so on. But as someone is starting this journey, everyone will need to follow.
If I may jump in, I think also in this case there's a strong case for having standardized ways of sharing data. So the upstream trading partners will have one way of sharing their data, regardless on in which supply chain their products go. So they don't have to sit and register manually traceability data into 10 different platforms, because their brand customers choose different systems. So and I think the role for standards there is to lower the barrier, to make it easier, and also to boost competition between various technology providers, so that the best one, you can compete on in other ways than vendor lock. And I know Trustrace is very committed to standards, so I dare say this in this context. But I think it's an important thing to make sure that it's based on open standards, and that the standards must be made in a way that they simplify the data sharing, including all the upstream trading partners.
So talk about where we are in terms of these standards, because I'm now now we're having this conversation. I'm also in contact with other technology developers that claim to play a role in digital product passport. There are even companies out there that claim they sell a DPP that's ready and done. That feels to me a bit premature, since we don't even know where the legislation will land. But Staffan, maybe you can at least paint a picture of how you would like this standardization to play out, and what players do we need? Because one way of thinking about this is like, okay, so there is this digital product passport. That's one type of technology that needs to be connected to the physical garments. You need to read it. I'm assuming you want to push for the barcodes there and your technologies. But then, during the course of the lifetime of the garment, which we're talking about here, there will need to be different data suppliers, I'm assuming, into this product passport. So at best as you can we kind of describe what the kind of architecture here is?
Not really. No, what we're saying is, because nobody really knows the requirements.
Yeah.
And the standards effort always starts with the requirements. A lot of requirements are known. on the what we want to accomplish, or what the legislators want to accomplish, I should say. We're just here to help. But in order to get the standards going, the EU has commissioned now the CEN and CENELEC, which is the standards bodies at European level, to start developing DPP standards. And they don't start from scratch. They've been giving a huge list of existing standards to form the basis. But I think we have all the standards, or most of the standards, that are kind of comply as the ingredients, if you wish, for the DPP exist, but there's no recipe yet that tells you exactly which ingredients and what's the quantity of each thing. So this needs to be done in the next coming years. I think CEN and the EU Commission just recently agreed on this task for CEN, and many of us will participate in that work. And adding, bringing in our user communities, bringing in our knowledge, and bringing in, even more important, the knowledge of users and service providers that have already done this. But there are a number of ways to, we've been experimenting a little bit and prototyping in some projects, and there are multiple ways of adding data to an existing product passport. We just have to pick the one that works, or that one is most suitable, especially if you have the situation where a brand owner puts the product on the market, but he doesn't want anyone else to tamper with his data. So why should he allow anyone to add data in a platform that he supports? Maybe he wants to have the upscaling or refurbishment of products himself, and so there needs to be a mechanism. So if data is added by an independent downstream stakeholder, that is still discoverable for the consumer, and that's one of the challenges. There are many challenges, but that's one of them. Access control and things like that is also a challenge, I think, because IP is a huge issue in the DPP.
Right.
So a market surveillance authority or a recycler may need much more data than the brand owners want to reveal to the general public, including their competitors. So I think that is also an important thing that needs to be worked on. So there are a number of gaps, but there are a lot of things that we know how they will work.
But just to that point, just to clarify, you're talking about there's some data that's going to be attached to the passport that will be visible kind of for everyone, and the consumer can go in and see where it's been produced and so forth. But there's actually some data that will be required to be documented, but it's kind of proprietary to the brand about.
I think brands will. The forecast is that brands will be asked by the surveillance authority to provide more data than they want to share with the general public.
All right, interesting. Sandra, maybe you can describe how much do you cover in this pilot project? Because you don't cover the whole kind of life cycle of the product, from my understanding, right? But so how much do you cover in the Trace for Value project, and how do you see this go on later?
Well, we cover all the tiers. We usually talk about 4 tiers: the garment, the fabric, the yarn, the fiber. So we do put in data of all the tiers, since that's how far we come. But what we don't have is the climate footprint, for example. And that's because we are not really sure on how to calculate the public carbon footprint to not make a green claim that will be scrutinized by authorities and found illegal or something. So that's why we have been reluctant to publish these footprint data.
But isn't that kind of what you want in this?
Yeah.
Like, you, as a consumer, you would actually want that's the actual upside of this. I want to know how much carbon footprint my garment is. What are the challenges in providing that information?
Well, the challenge is that there's a debate, you can say, between how much generic data and specific data you need to have in order to provide an environmental declaration of a specific product. So again, the HIG tools that I talked about before, they have this HIG product module. And when H&M and Norrøna used this HIG tool with a lot of generic data in Norway, the Norwegian Consumer Authority actually took them to court. So that's not where we want to go. So still there is a bit uncertainty about how much you can say about the specific product based on specific data versus generic data. But I hope that soon this will be solved, and that both the eco-design legislation and also the PEF, the product environmental footprint that the EU is developing, will sort out, like, what do you need to make a product environmental footprint for a specific product.
So, and are you saying you would like it to be able to include some generic data? That is, I mean, it sounds impossible to have each specific garment to have each, like.
I mean, in the future, that's the way to go, to have specific data for all tiers. So it's specific data about the weaving, the cotton cultivation, etc. But as for now, we are, on our way to start to get to know our tier 2 and tier 3. So we don't have that specific data yet, and it's also huge amounts of data. Like, how are we going to store this? How are we going to use this data without having hundreds of servers using a lot of energy? So it's not only the more data the better, but we really need to have sort of the right data and stored for the right time, etc.
And this links back, Konrad, to the circle that you mentioned previously. The earlier phases of the circle, going back from the manufacturer and all the maybe 4 tiers, as Sandra mentions here. If those data flows are digitalized in a good way, they will automatically generate all the kind of basic data, the raw data that is needed to make those calculations. And not only those calculations, they will also make up the data that is needed for any ESG reporting and for any compliance with other legislations as well, such as deforestation, such as due diligence and things like that. So we think that digital supply chains is the future, and we just have to figure out how far you can go in terms of granularity. But ideally, if you don't care about how much servers you need, maybe pretend that the issue doesn't exist for a second. There's really no technical reason why you shouldn't be able to tell a specific product what that specific product carbon footprint is, if you have the right data behind it. But is it worth the effort? Is it possible? Is it also politically possible to make companies reveal as much data as is needed to do this? But you will need to know, what are the solar panels on this factory in this country, and who produced the solar panels, and what's the sustainability parameters for those solar panels? There's a lot of data you need to be granular. And granularity is endless, but I guess you'll have to come to a right level that is feasible at some point in time.
So Jenny, maybe you can provide what is the right level of granularity?
Well, I'm not an expert within how to calculate carbon footprint for sure, but we're following that for a couple of years now. And again, I mean, the need for standardization in the calculation. But to start with, again, I mean, just knowing where your stuff is coming from what fabric, where is the value chains, where is the dyeing, the printing, where is this done? That's, I mean, when you start to identify that's a huge step forward. And when we have the geolocalization of where your stuff has been produced, then there is a large number of calculations that we can put on top of that as soon as the calculation is clarified how it should be done.
So describe. So from my understanding, the DPP pilot that you are doing goes up until when the brand gets the product, right? You are not documenting the transportation out to individual stores and so forth. Sandra, maybe you can provide a specification of like how far do you go?
No, I'm not really sure here, actually. Maybe I should know, but I think for maybe you know, Jenny, better.
Well, as you say, transportation is not considering as per today, But on the other hand, what's been calculated previously is that, yes, transportation has a footprint for sure, but the production footprint is so much bigger. So that's why we start with a production footprint. And so we will have, until it reaches sort of the store from a production point of view, what we haven't figured out yet, what's happened after, and how do we involve the stakeholders that will take care of the product after it's sold. If we have a resell, a repair, or a recycle, how do we add their solution? How do we digitalize their data, and how do we add that to the product passport? That is something we are looking into right now, also from a technique point of view. But in that area, the legislation and requirement has come even less far. So there we really need to understand how should that be done after the sale of the product is done. And also I need to say, and that I would like to encourage everyone that has the possibilities to, how do we start to build business models and support these companies that would like to provide recycle, repair, and resell offerings to the end consumers, because that area is it's very, very early in the early days of how to create circular business models. But when that is in place, the DPP framework that we are looking into now from a technical point of view, it will for sure be able to scale and include this post-sales actors as well.
Well, resell and recycling is it's its own show, I think. So we're not going to get into all that. But can we envision a little bit about how the DPP will, what kind of role it will play for the consumer, and what are the upsides? I've seen examples in the luxury industry, for instance. I think the Richemont Group is doing experiments or actually have launched products where, of course, if you have a very highly valued luxurious product, there's going to be value for the consumer in some kind of proof of the value, because there's so much copies out there and so forth. Maybe that's not going to be as relevant for a T-shirt that's disposable, or underwear or whatever that's kind of disposable and don't have this kind of value on the second hand market. But starting with the consumer, I'm curious, all of you, I'm sure you've thought about this. How do we incentivize the consumer to upload information to the passport? Because somehow I guess they have to be connected to it, and what happens after. Staffan, maybe you have some words here.
Well, it's a little bit out of my regular things that I deal with. But of course, from earlier examples on traceability implementations in the food industry, like 10 years ago, we went to visit, to see in some other countries where they put a QR code on products and you can scan and see where this fish came from. But the statistics were like, the first week 100 consumers did this, and then nobody ever used it. And they said, well, maybe it's consumers are happy enough that they know that they can do this. I saw a recent study from France when it comes in food, where they have a system like in many European countries called Nutri-Score, where it's a green, red, yellow light on food packages telling you if this is good for you or not. So it's a very simplified thing. And most consumers don't seem to care. They buy what they always buy, but the manufacturers have made the products better. So the effect is still that people eat better food, but not for the reasons you expected. So and we're just in a Venova project is just being initiated to study more, how consumers are affected by this kind of transparency, and how much is their behavior really affected by having access to that kind of data. But that's focusing on electronics. and it hasn't started yet, so there's nothing to share on that. But it's an interesting topic. Sometimes we think, sometimes it seems like some people think it has a bigger impact than it really has, but who am I to know? That maybe that depends on how you communicate it.
But Sandra, how do you foresee digital product passport play a role with the consumer? Is it a positive thing? Is it a burden? Is it just complicated, or is it actually adding value to the brand and the product?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably it will just like be to the key to the house. It's something that you use a lot, but you don't really think so much about it or care about it. But if it adds you value, if you're going to resell something on a platform and you get more value if you can fill in the part, did you do any repair, did you change any buttons or zippers, or if you have filled in that information like no, nothing, or yes I did, and you can get a higher price, and maybe how many washes did you do to it, and you can sell it for a higher price. I think it will be just like with cars, that you keep a record of whatever you've done to your car, and then the next buyer will be have more certainty of what they buy. Like did this car be in a car crash and repaired? Yes or no? Good to know if you buy a car. And the same with textiles, that you, if it's value creating for the consumer, they will use it.
And have you foreseen anything with terms of end of life? I mean, there's this other legislation called the extended producer responsibility that the EU is talking about, where in various ways you have to be responsible for what happens to the product after you sell it. It's not just it doesn't leaves the store and it's bye. You still have to engage in it. Have you given any thought of or worked a lot on that kind of part of the chain?
Yeah, and this is the large value, I think, that to get back an item and you are not really sure of where is it produced, when, with which chemicals, what is the exact composition, instead of having to do a lot of guesswork, you can actually know that this is a Kappahl garment or a garment from another brand, and that opens up for planning for what to do with the garment already when you create it. You know that in step 1 you will maybe do an enzyme washing. In step 2, the enzyme washing is to like restore the garment, and in step 2 you will do something else, and in step 3 you will maybe be able to material recycle it. But there is like a world of opportunities opening up actually when we know it's not like a mixed heap of a pile of clothing with different brands, different years, but we know exactly what this garment is. That will create so much more opportunities.
And I'm thinking, Sandra, also that it will create opportunities for adapting the design of new garments based on knowledge for what the previous seasons and styles has sort of ended up.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we talk sustainability.
A closed feedback loop. Yeah, I mean that's it's really a whole new world in front of us.
And also, if I may add, there is also a lot of discussion on the more practical side of this, whether you should have data carriers on the garments, not only barcodes but also RFID tags, or there are various types of RFID tags, so you can automate the sorting. So if you have a common sorting facility where you all the garments from all the brands come in just a pile, you can robotize or automate the sorting and send back. So all the Kappahl garments go in one pile and it's sent back to Kappahl, and you know exactly what's in your product, so you know how to utilize them best.
Super interesting. I feel like we can have one show on each part of this circle that you once showed me, Staffan. We're coming up on the end of this conversation. Maybe, Jenny, you can describe where this project is going and what are kind of the next steps, and where you hoping to land. I know there's some kind of touch base at the beginning of 2024. So what are the hopes for the results of this project?
So I think to point out the main how to measure success of this is really to do insight and learnings, for sure. And as per now, up to now, we have published the data protocol, and the journey of creating that protocol has been provided us with huge insights. So what's happening right now is that we have provided a framework, an architectural framework that we believe in based on the requirements that are known. For example, that the data should be distributed, meaning that it shouldn't be until one source, but when a consumer scans the QR code, then with their mobile, they open up a website in their mobile, and in there, that we call that a DPP interface. And that interface is calling sort of a library that we refer to as a resolver. And in that library, it holds a lot of URLs, and these URLs are saying, where is the information stored? Because it can be several data sources for this unique product. So via API, it collects this data and it shows up instantly for the consumer in the web interface in their mobile phone. And this is exactly what we are building right now to be ready by early next year. And there we would like to showcase, we can do this in practice. And then I'm sure we will run into a lot of challenges, questions along the way. And these questions we would like to share with a broader public of EU Commission that is actually working on requirements, as well as every other stakeholders that's involved in making a DPP come true in the future, to see this is the learnings that we have done. Please continue to build your future pilots and future solutions on these learnings, so we can have this in the industry and adding it to the industry in a collaborative manner.
So it sounds like we have a reason to do a follow-up show beginning of next year. I'd like all of you to before we end there, just briefly give a recommendation or a tip or a link or something for people who are curious about DPPs, and there's a lot of people working in the fashion industry listening to this. Where should they start? What's a good way to enter into this? You can plug your own thing or maybe something else. Certainly I hope this conversation is a start for many people. But where do we go from here? Sandra, a recommendation?
I think it's good to actually deep dive in, for example, the data protocol from Trace for Value, which is public and out there for people to look at, and really go through and not maybe just think that, this is data we have in the PLM system, but actually consider exactly where in the PLM system is the field that is going to cover this, or do we have it in two fields that we should merge into one, etc. Because the devil is in the detail, and it's just when you start to understand like exactly how is it going to be, the data going to be created, then you have come a long way.
Staffan, what's your recommendation?
Well, I like everyone here says, don't wait. Start small, but start now. If you haven't started digitalizing your supply chain at all, it's this is a good time to start. And if you want to get more insights on the DPP concept, GS1 Sweden has created a landing page on our website, gs1.se, so you can go there and take a look. It's available in English and Swedish as a starting point.
Jenny?
Yeah, of course I need to put a word for Trustrace here as well, that please reach out if you would like to have some support and insights of where to start related to how do you actually start to gather this data, how do you reach out to the suppliers at scale to start with trace where your garments are originated from. But also again, Trace for Value website holds a lot of good information, so that's a good starting point.
Wonderful. We'll link that in the show notes. So it was my ambition with this conversation to explain DPP. I think let's consider this a starting point. There's much more to be studied and learned, obviously. Thank you so much, Jenny Wärn, Sandra Roos and Staffan Olsson, for sharing your insights today.